Hi, I'm Carrie Kirkham with the Mollie Stone's Wine and Spirits team. Welcome and thank you for joining us to celebrate Oregon Wine Month. And I have Eric Mueller with me. He's from Domaine Serene from Dayton, Oregon. He's going to go over the trio of beautiful wines before you. I will add that today is May 20th. It is my 2-year anniversary of working with Mollie Stone's Markets, which has been fantastic 2 years. And I cannot think of a better way than to celebrate it with you, Eric, tasting these amazing award-winning wines. And cheers to that.
Cheers to you, and cheers to 2 years on there with Mollie Stones. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak today and to really share our story, the story of Ken and Grace Evanstad and the winery that they created we're approaching 32 years ago now. And then, of course, sharing our flagship wines with you that bear their name, at least on 2 of them for it. It's a pleasure on there. I'm more than happy to kind of start. We have a bit of a presentation for the sense I always like to actually be me. And by that, it means that I like to show pictures of where I get to call my everyday life and tease you and express to you our love for the area and region. What you can see in front of you right now is what we refer to as our Winery Hill Estate, which is where our winemaking facility and our clubhouse are located. The winemaking facility is off to the left. You can see that tower. That's actually where I'm located currently on the property. And then, of course, the clubhouse to the right is really meant to help us facilitate our bespoke experiences for guests that are our guests, consumers, members that are visiting us and getting a chance to experience the wines and a myriad of different experiences on that for you. Of course, we are America's most acclaimed winery for that. There we go. And we were founded by Ken and Grace Evanstad. Last year was a bit of a rough year for us, especially for those that have been here for a while, with the passing of Ken on there. But we are still very blessed to have Grace at the helm of the company and helping to drive it forward and helping to ensure that both their vision. The interesting thing for them is that they didn't just go out and buy a winery and put their name on it. They built from the ground up, starting in 1989 with 42 acres of land, really a legacy. And it was all founded around the desire to make the world's best Pinot Noir and then later Chardonnay on there, which they were able to achieve several times. I've been blessed to also see Ken's personal mission statement that he wrote back in the mid-1980s before they even started it. And number 16 on the list was to make the world's best Pinot Noir. Most interesting about it is the first 5 items wasn't about success for himself financially, wasn't about Pinot or anything. It had everything to do with being a great father, a great husband, and friends to other, mentor on there, and really that should give you a sense of who Ken and Grace are and who, what they brought to this company and helped to build with it for it.
And wine is a reflection of that. It's not only a reflection of the place, it's a reflection of the people who make the wine and what they've created.
It is, and it's a reflection, I think, of their character and their personalities on there. It's a form of art, and I think art is the same way, however you want to refer to it on there. But as I mentioned, we were founded by Grace and Ken Evanstad in 1989. It began with 42-acre hilltop. Grace and Ken had done their due diligence. At the time, the property that's now known as Evanstad Estate actually had been split into 3 parcels, and all 2 of the 3 parcels had been already pre-purchased. The remaining parcel was the one that had the highest elevation, between 600 to 825 feet in elevation. And the reason it was still available, according to the broker on there, was that nobody thought you could grow good grapes on this land, and it wasn't going to be someplace that grapes. It also was facing to the west. So not only was it at an elevation where at the time the thought process in the Willamette Valley was you never grew grapes above 600 feet in elevation. And of course, in winemaking, nobody ever really buys property that faces to the west. It actually has 3 of our most prestigious single vineyards on it now: Mark Bradford, Fleur-de-Lis, and Artois, which is a Chardonnay. And actually in the Evanstad Reserve Chardonnay that we're going to drink today, the Artois vineyard is one of the vineyards that's actually in this particular Chardonnay for it. So they have a way of how do I say this? They had a way of very politely saying thank you to people that gave them advice and taking it into consideration, but having their own thought process, and time again came out and they were proven correct in their thought on there for it. And they were the first to really make an international market for Oregon Pinot. They told Grace that they would never sell it outside of the state of Oregon. Nobody did. And Grace used to fly across the country and take cases of wine with her and go knock on doors of retailers and restaurants throughout New York, Florida, California, and really build relationships. And it got to a point that, we can be found across the world now with our wines for it. And really everything is about the pursuit of quality, winemaking without compromise. We have a state-of-the-art 5-level gravity flow winery that was built in 2001, which is the building I'm in right now. And of course, the Clubhouse that came later, completed our white winery in 2018. But right now we have 6 vineyard estates, 275 acres planted on 3 different Willamette Valley AVAs. And we'll go into a little bit more of that in a bit.
But back to the gravity flow winery, that's actually a very important thing when it comes to subtlety and wine quality. Because as you're racking wine, as you're moving it through the winery, if you're using a pump, our viewers may not know, it has an impeller. And that has an effect on the wine. It's a little rougher on the wine. If you use just gravity flow to go from vessel to vessel, you're able to preserve very subtle phenolics. You're not agitating the wine. And so whenever I hear gravity flow winery and Burgundian style wines, I mean, it's ticking boxes in my mind. So sorry to interrupt.
No, please do. This is interactive between you and me, Carrie. We're going to share and go back and forth. But yeah, I mean, the layman's term is that Pinot Noir is a wuss grape, and it does not like pumps. It likes to have gravity fed, less is better interaction into it. And really right to the right of where that picture is on there is where the grapes come in and starts the process through 5 different levels. And the bottom 2 floors are actually built into the hillside. From the outside, the building looks small, but if you actually knew, it's actually an 80,000 square foot winery on there that can hold 3 different vintages. Interesting enough too, that one of the things that they did was build a winery that could hold vintages and then not released right away when they produced it. They knew that they were going to want to have wines that were aged the proper amount of time in barrel, and then also have the proper amount of aging in bottle before we released it. And it was going to be a minimum of at least 14 months in barrel for our Pinot Noirs, and at least 14 months in bottle for the Pinot Noirs too. So realistically, it's a minimum of 28 months before we even release a vintage. And so we're always kind of a vintage behind everybody else on our release schedule because they started that way. They had the foresight to set us up for success to have the ability to do that for it. This is our clubhouse. This is where it's a 30,000 square foot space. And that's the reason I put it there is, once again, I told you I was going to be mean and show you the views that you can have when you come up here and see, and the days, and a nice, gorgeous July summer day. But this is really the facility that allows us to do bespoke experiences at the winery. So, I grew up here in the valley, farming, an 8th generation Oregonian, and I bring a certain perspective to the valley. When I was a kid, all the growers of grapes at that time and all the winemakers, we actually thought they were all nuts. I will say that on our family farm, which we sold in the 90s, there is now a winery, of which I will not name, that sits on it. So I was proven wrong. We were proven wrong on it. But I come with a healthy background of understanding that maybe the 3 most important things we do to begin with is farm, farm, and farm on there. If you don't have high quality fruit to begin with, you're not going to make a high quality wine. And it's just absolutely instrumental into what we do. For us, it's about having estate fruit. So all of our Pinot Noir and Chardonnay is 100% estate fruit. Having that control and that to an OCD level is from start to finish is just critical in making the wine. As I said, we're in 3 different American viticultural areas: the Eola Amity AVA, the Dundee Hills, which is the most critical for our Chardonnay, and then of course the Yamhill Carlton AVA. located within kind of a concentric 18-mile radius for the different estates, elevations from 200 to 1,000 feet in elevation. Really a nuanced portfolio that helps us with these particular wines in the sense that we call it the art of the blend. Blending them from different sites allows us to have a consistency of both house style and a consistency of quality year in and year out, that when you uncork one of these bottles of wines, you know what they are on there, and it delivers every single time for it. Everything is dry farmed. We believe that for our estates that dry farming within the struggle for the roots and for the vines actually helps to make better grapes. And so it forces them to go deep into the soil, whether it's the Jory soil, the Dundee Hills, or the Woodburn series, sedimentary soils of the lower elevations of the Yola-Amity on there, or our Willett-Kenzie soil, the oldest soil types that you find in the Willamette Valley, which is ocean floor bottom for it. Well, let's talk about the Chardonnay and talk a little bit about the winemaking approach to this, and a little bit about what makes this wine unique. This in a previous vintage was #1 white wine in the world from Wine Spectator, and consistently delivers just year in and year out. First of all, there's 3 things that make this wine what it is, and it is Dijon clones, Jory soil, and high elevation. And let's talk a little bit about what a Dijon clone and what the implication is for not just for us, but for the Willamette Valley as a whole on there. When we first started making Chardonnay in Oregon, we were using Wente clones from California on there. Interesting enough, though, as most of you know, our weather patterns are not the same as California. And so it just wasn't quite getting ripe enough, and it didn't have a long enough growing season to really hit home and make high quality Chardonnay, which is why they shied away from it for so many years. Lo and behold, though, some of the early pioneers in the Willamette Valley, and Ken and Grace quickly adapted it and became some of the first, if not first, to have planted Dijon clone, realized that having a late flowering, early ripening clonal varietal of Chardonnay would be better suited for the Willamette Valley. And it is almost predominantly, not 100%, but it'd be hard pressed to find other clones in the Willamette Valley now that aren't Dijon clones, because this is what is making world-class Chardonnay. The second part about that is Jory soil. And about 5 to 7 million years ago, lava flows flew across from eastern Oregon, and it happened in Northern California and Washington, and really came across from Montana, and they came across the Willamette Valley. And so at the higher elevations in the Willamette Valley, in the hills, you have these broken down basalt lava flows that form a very iron-rich soil type that, if it's over 60 depth, is called Jory soil. And Jory soil is what makes the Dundee Hills sub-appellation of the Willamette Valley what it is on there. So all of our clones are for Dijon. All of our Chardonnay, I should say, is grown in the Dundee Hills, where our Pinot Noir has a little bit more diversity as far as the other AVAs also for it. The other one is the high elevation. Much like California, for those who live down there, we have our version of the Petaluma Gap called the Van Duzer Corridor. And the Van Duzer Corridor helps to bring in these very cool winds at nighttime. And because of where the Dundee Hills is located at the higher elevations, it really helps to create a high to low shift in temperature that at nighttime that helps the plants to shut down, helps them to rest, and helps to maintain that minerality and acidity levels that helps to drive that driving balance through this particular Chardonnay for it. For me, the white flowers, a little lemon zest, a little pitted fruit, jasmine, I think, is Carrie, what you were saying earlier, from the floral tones coming across it. I almost have a little hint of lime zest a bit in the back, and that's that Artois Chardonnay, that single vineyard kind of coming through on it. But we have 5 single vineyards of Chardonnay, the Artois, Côte de Soleil, Côte de Lune, Triple Crown, and Winery Hill on there, that all go into making this particular Chardonnay. And what we're doing is hand-picking barrels to go into it. The other part that's interesting enough that we were having a conversation earlier is really our approach to balance in the wine between oak and that sensation of butter, which is diacetyl. And diacetyl is a byproduct of malolactic fermentation, which, if you've ever had a white wine that is just tart green apple and the sides of your cheeks just pinch in really quickly and you're just salivating, that's a white wine that hasn't gone through malolactic fermentation. Most white wines will, but not all of them do. on there. Chardonnays in particular typically will go through some format of malolactic fermentation. A byproduct of that is diacetyl, and diacetyl is that butter. So if you've ever had a Chardonnay that's really rich and creamy with that butter on there, it has a high diacetyl level within the wine. We want some of that, but we don't want to have that be the overt part of the wine. We want it to be balanced, as we want all the components that are really making the Chardonnay what it is for it. So we actually work with strains of lactic acid bacterium, which is what helps to change the malic acid into lactic acid, or the lactic acid and the malic acid on there, and helps to give it that sensation of body weight, but also having not an overt buttery sensation to it, and really trying to make it. The last part is that we use foudre, and foudres are 1,050-gallon wooden tanks that are temperature controlled, at least the ones we do, to help really give the structure to the wine. We spend a lot of time and a lot of complexity in there. Carrie, what do you think? And are any questions I can answer you that the group might be interested in about this particular wine?
So I know this is made in the Burgundian style, and a lot of Burgundian whites do well with aging. Could you age this wine? And if so, what is that age range you would recommend?
Certainly. Well, lately, yesterday I was actually just opening up 2010 through 2014 Evanstad Reserve Chardonnay, and they all had at least 5 to 10 years left in them and showing very well on there. And by that, I mean before they start to go downwards on there. Part of it's the acid. Acid is a great way of increasing ageability in a wine, and these do have that acid. It's not overbearing. It's not the only thing that you get. You have flavor profiles that are with it in there that are lingering and continuing that finish, which is the sign of a well-made wine. But with the oak presence that we have, which is there but subtle, and the acid structure, these wines definitely have ageability to them. And very much like you would find from a Chardonnay de Montrachet or Polini Montrachet or Meursault over in Burgundy on that.
Yeah, Polini Montrachet was what came to mind when I first tasted this. I even get a subtle, this is a very strange thing, I get a subtle green tea finish. Just there's so much going on in this wine, and it evolves with temperature. I've noticed, I've had this bottle open for about half an hour, and I noticed that it's already evolving. What is your ideal serving temperature, would you say, for this wine?
I'd say somewhere around 65 to 68 degrees. I think as it warms up, so I keep everything super cool in my wine cooler. I just keep it at one temperature, typically about 53 degrees in my wine cooler. It's a little cooler than some places do, but I pull them and also know that I can pull it out, open it, and then let it come up. If you have this wine too cool, it constricts and doesn't allow the expressiveness of it. It will actually get better as it warms up. I also think, we were talking a little earlier before everybody else came on about what does this pair with? What do you want to put this in? What would I put this with? And I was joking that, kind of joking, not joking, is that like a Friday night for me and my wife with a movie, this and some popcorn, I absolutely love, just a bowl of popcorn with a little butter on it, salt, and this. Yes. And it just goes so well. But,
yes,
the number one dish that I think I've seen, it's a rough life, but I've had many James Beard chefs do wine dinners with this, and I've gotten to eat their food on there, is that they love putting scallops, large sea scallops with it that are seared in a pan with a little bit of butter, and you take the spoon and kind of dredge it over the top of it. The trick is very much to sear it just lightly and leave just a medium rare to almost a rare on the inside of the scallop, because texturally that kind of umami sensation of the texture of that scallop at that, with the butter flavor and a little bit of lemon zest over the top across this Chardonnay, can't be beat. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't say Dungeness crab. Dungeness crab, drawn butter, and this Chardonnay to me, it's absolute heaven. I can't go wrong. But I don't know, Carrie, anything else you might think to pair with that?
Well, I want to mention cheeses that you might recommend, and then we'll move on to the Pinot. But we'll wrap it up with, what cheeses would you recommend?
To me, Beechers, anything that has a little bit of salt to it. So I don't know if you've had Beechers and the salinity that you get. Yeah. So something with a little bit of salinity to the outside. Crazily enough, I love blue cheeses. So anything like a Logsdon blue cheese or something like that with Chardonnay. Some people, I get it that some people aren't blue cheese people, but for those that are, this, because the acid drives through it and really pops out the flavor of the blue cheese with it. To me, those are two that I'm a really big fan of. But the Lychee de Bourgogne, I mean, but that just goes with anything. Like the Lychee Bourgogne should just be part of every meal on this planet. It's basically butter. We all know it. And
yes, the Lychee Bourgogne. Yep. Oh my God, I'm daydreaming. I wish I had these cheeses with me.
Anybody that ever gets to go to France, the cheese platters are enough. I could just live off of them.
Let's talk Pinot.
Let's do it. There.
I love that you don't have a dump bucket.
I know. I realize that.
I wouldn't either.
Like, you know what? I'm just going to have to deal with it.
Yes. I don't have one right now either. So
it's a tough day of work for me.
Yes.
Well, let's go forward just a little bit on this. And, this is the Evanstad estate. And I think what I always like to kind of point out about this is that there was 3 different purchases. So in that hand-drawn picture there where you can kind of see the crest of the top of the hill, everything to the left of that was the original 42 acres. Everything to the right of that was actually purchased in 1993. And the back part of it, the furthest distance, was purchased in 1997. So up to 142 acres there's only 66 planted. This is an interesting, I think, approach, and something worthy of noting is our approach to our land. We have 275 plus acres planted, but we actually own 1,300 acres. The idea isn't to plant everything. The idea is only to plant the best sections of the land that we own to make sure that we're getting the best grapes and to leave a healthy amount of trees and nature, because it's that coexisting with the environment that really is what makes it sustainable. We like to say before sustainability became the in thing, we were actually doing sustainable. We're live certified on all of our farms for our grapes for it. And for us, we didn't change any practices to get the certification. Literally, there wasn't a single thing that we changed. We just applied for it because we were already doing it. And that was just how we kind of viewed everything for it. But this is the Evanstad estate in the original where they started. This is Triple Crown. That's the view of, once again, I told you I wasn't going to make it easy on you. That's the view from, we can also see that from the winery, Mount Hood, gorgeous off in the background. Triple Crown is one of our latest expansions in the mixture of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. For it, predominantly Chardonnay, and some of that Triple Crown was in the Chardonnay there for you. Next, we have Winery Hill Estate, which is where we're located currently. Also winner of #1 Pinot in the world from Decanter several years ago for it, but has some Chardonnay mixed into it. And the Pinot that you're going to have right now, the Yamhill Cuvée, and then the Evanstad Reserve Pinot Noir, they're both the art of the blend. We're handpicking barrels from all of these sites. That's why I'm showing them to you, so that you get a sense of the depth of the portfolio. Because what we're doing is we're handpicking signature barrels that are going to help to give us that consistency of house style and consistency of quality each time, and what makes these wines what they are for it. Yamhill Cuvée and Evanstad Reserve are meant to be subtly different approaches to making Pinot Noir. I always find Yamhill Cuvée to be a little bit more plush in the approach and the style to making it. A little bit more approachable, but yet still that classic premium Oregon Pinot, pomegranate and cherries and raspberries, bright cherry kind of mixing into it for it. I think that one of the unique things about this and the components of what makes Domaine Serene's Pinot Noirs what it is our understanding of barrels and the understanding of the different cooperages and how they interact with the individual blocks that we have. We work with about 16 different cooperages. Everything's 100% French oak here, both Pinot and Chardonnay for that as far as it goes, but different programs. And we specifically understand the rootstocks, the clones, and how they intermix with this. For Pinot Noir versus the Chardonnay, which was singly Dijon clone, we actually work with Dijon clone and Pommard clones and a little bit of Wadensville on there, just a slight amount that gives some different tones off of it, coming from all the different sites, different elevations for it. This particular vintage, the 2017 vintage, was a little bit warmer and had a little bit heat actually come towards the end of the vintage, but yet we still ended up getting a perfect balance of physiological and phenolic ripening occurring at the right time. And I think it really speaks to the fact that we drop a ton of fruit. We're not about high yields, we're about making the best wine. And so by leaving the leaves on, dropping the fruit, only picking the fruit that we knew was going to make the best wine, we ended up coming in with just a really solid representation. Food-wise, for me, in this particular wine, I am always a fan of the French dish called canard malard, which is a fancy way of saying seared duck. And so it's taking a duck breast. It has the skin still with the duck fat on the outside of it. You sear it in a cross cut and you put it onto a flat iron and you sear that outside. The heat ends up caramelizing the fat and giving it a little bit of a sugar heated content to it. You then want to flip it, put it into the oven and bake it. And then while you're doing that on the side, take maybe a little bit of balsamic and maybe something like a bramble compote, and put it into and make a compote that you can then drizzle over the top of the duck. Paired with this, needless to say, yes, I am on a cholesterol drug. I'll joke with everybody on that too, because I have a love affair with food, wine, and everything that goes with that. But Carrie, anything that you might pair with this particular wine, or what do you think of the wine?
Okay. Well, I want to talk about the tannins really quick. I want to get back to food because that is what I'm all about. But what I do want to talk about is the tannic structure. Where are those tannins coming from? I know there are oak tannins that affect certain parts of the mouth, and then there are grape tannins that affect other parts of the mouth. So let's talk tannins. What do you got for us?
Yeah, no, certainly on there. So I think part of it, so for me, when I'm sensing fruit tannins versus oak tannins, I tend to get fruit tannins on the front of the tongue and towards the front of the mouth present. And I get oak tannins on the side of the mouth and that dryness on that and kind of where it's hitting and presenting itself. Some of the spice structure that you have in here is actually coming from the oak too. And in particular, I always like to think of like the barrels, one of the cooperages we use, Domaine, has this certain spice structure to the oak that, for whatever reason, this particular cooperage and where they're sourcing their trees from really has this influence into the wines and how it presents and where it's coming from. The tannin bodies to this particular wine for me are not overbearing, but yet present there. I would even say that, in the Evanstad Reserve, we always like to say too that, the old thought process is that if you're going to have a New York or ribeye or filet mignon, a steak of some nature, that you need to have a cap. We like to challenge that and say that these wines actually have structure and body and presence that could go up against the steak like that, and that actually overpower the flavor profiles. If you have a Wagyu, ribeye, you've got this world-class ribeye. Do you want to taste the steak or do you want to taste the wine? You want them to work in conjunction to each other. And this particular, both this and the Evanstad Reserve, we think are able to handle up against that and also go against lighter fare like the duck I was talking about. For it. Ageability, that was something we talked about with the Chardonnay on there. Lately, I've been drinking some of the 2003s and 2004 GMO cuvées. This is easily a 20 to 25 year age Pinot as far as the ageability goes on it.
Wow, because it has the acid and it has the tannin structure. Great acidity, great tannin structure. They're fine grain tannins and it's across the palate. It doesn't punch you on the sides of the mouth. It washes over beautifully. These fine, elegant matrix of fine grain tannins. I love that. I mean, the pairability, food friendliness of this wine is immense. My first thought was I used to eat at a restaurant in Oakland called Beowulf, and they used to do duck and Pinot dinners. Jim Clendenin, rest his soul, from Aubin Clement used to do pairings with duck dinners. And so I used to go there specifically for that because I'm a total Pinot nerd. And I would pair this with duck. That was my first thought, duck and lentils. Duck and lentils de Puy, the fine lentils. And then also, as far as cheese goes, I would love this with an aged Gouda. A nice salty with the crystallization and the butterscotch aged Gouda. Oh, I'm getting chills thinking about it.
That was from a cheese standpoint. That's funny that you said that because that's exactly where I was going with it too. Either that or an aged cheddar, a little bit, like especially that both those kind of ranges on there. I think are something that would really go up against as well. So,
on the palate, it's very interesting. I don't know what kind of trees surround the vineyard, but I'm getting something like I'm getting something like a bay, maybe bay or eucalyptus, mild, very subtle. I mean, you almost have to have a bloodhound kind of palate to pick it up. So what kind of trees flank the property, do you know?
For the property, it's white oak and firs is what makes up the Willamette Valley on that. So it's not going to be a eucalyptus, but we get it too. It's sage or bay leaf a little bit that we get out of our Pinots, you know.
It's so subtle. It's so subtle. So now that I'm tasting it again, it's definitely like a bay quality.
Yeah.
There's definitely like a garrigue, so to speak. And you know, who needs cab when you have Domaine Serene Pinot Noir? I mean, seriously, why even bother? Because it is about synergy. I don't want a huge cab blowing out my steak because it is a balancing act. And they support each other and they make the overall experience better. This is just infinitely pairable. Just wonderful.
So Yamhill Cuvée too, where it gets its name from, is that all of our estates are located in Yamhill County. Interesting enough, after we started making this wine, there actually is a sub-appellation or sub-American viticultural area in the Willamette Valley called Yamhill Carlton. We have a site in Yamhill Carlton, but this wine predates the designation of that American viticultural area. And when we thought it might have some confusion, but the thought process was, well, we predated it, so we were going to leave it. And for us, what this is that all the estates are in Yamhill County. In fact, most of Oregon wine region is located in Yamhill County on there. And so that's why, and it really is that hand picking different barrels from the different site. You can see once again that this is barrel aged for 14 months on there. The alcohol is, you know, considerable, not as low as you would maybe find in Burgundy with a 12.5 or a 13, but it's at 14.12. And this is pretty, that normally our wines range between 13.5 to maybe 14.4 at most. You know, it just kind of depends on the vintage. And that's part of the beauty of the growing season that we have here in the Willamette Valley, that we're able to get that ripeness, that physiological and phenolic ripeness, but yet also not have Brix levels that are too high on there. So we have the balance between acid and alcohol and flavor and structure and body that makes a really complete wine, and be able to have that finish and go there. I do know too, you know, the wine enthusiast notes where they talk about the orange peel. That's the other part too that I always get in the back of this, is a little bit of that orange peel flavor profile that goes. It's really intriguing. Let's move on to the next.
Dried orange peel.
Yeah, do you see that now?
Wow. In the finish.
Yeah.
Very cool. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's just an intriguing wine on there. All right, let's show the Two Barns estate. So Two Barns is an estate. Once again, it's got these pictures in it, so it's all about teasing you for it. But Two Barns is technically in the Dundee Hills, but it sits up against the Yamhill Carlton AVA and has a mixture of soils. Really unique site that plays into both the Evanstad Reserve Pinot and the Yamhill Cuvée, but predominantly the Evanstad Reserve Pinot as far as the next wine that we're going to go to. The little bit about the geological development of the Willamette Valley and what influences it and makes it what it is for it. Gosh, the oldest soil type we have is our ocean floor bottom. So if you go backwards in times, at many millions of years ago, roughly about 17 million, from what I understand, you have from northern, from British Columbia all the way into northern California, the coast range that goes the entire distance down there was actually an island chain that was much like the Hawaiian Islands. As the subduction zone off of the coast of the United States pushed together, it ended up pushing up that coastal range all the way along the entire western seaboard of the United States, and pushed it up and created what are now the coastal ranges that you have on it. That ocean floor bottom in the western part of the Willamette Valley is a soil type, for the most part, called Willackenzie soil that's very rich in calcium and nitrates on there. Two Barns has a bit of it on there. The Yamhill Carlton AVA, the Abbey Oaks AVA, is all Willackenzie soil. The second oldest type is that Jory soil that I mentioned earlier, which is that broken down basalt lava flows on there. And then the third soil type, this is an incredible story of how the soil came to be here. But we stole basically the topsoil from northern Idaho, western Montana, and eastern Washington about 11,000 to 17,000 years ago. At the end of the last ice age, a series of floods occurred over a period of about 1,000 years. And this was as the polar caps melted, an ice dam formed in Missoula, Montana, and a body of water the size of the two largest Great Lakes that we currently have formed behind this ice dam. As pressure increases, PSI, which would increase as you have a body of water that size at the lower depths, it actually changes the freezing temperature. And with the change in freezing temperature, the lower part of the dam actually degraded and actually had the dam blow out. And several times over a period of 1,000 years, all that water flowed out, and it's what helped to create the Columbia Gorge, which is what separates Oregon and Washington. And when that water got to where Portland, Oregon is, all that water flowed south into the Willamette Valley. So everything from 122 miles north to south and about 60 miles east to west from 300 feet and below was flooded several times over 1,000 years. And a good portion of it had topsoil that was deposited, and it's what's made what we call a Woodburn series soil that is a sedimentary soil, and that's on our Jerusalem site. And so really plays into the different flavor profiles that you're gonna get. The really bright red tone fruits, those bright red cherry and pomegranate, that comes typically from Jory soil. On there, I find that the Jerusalem Hill site that we have that has that Woodburn series soil has a bramble. So think Marionberry, where you have both red, black, and blue fruit cones coming out of it. And then, of course, the Willacante soil to me can have a mixture of different there. I find that more of a textural component in mouthfeel and those tannins. We're talking about the fruit tannins. And I also find it plays into the aromatics that come out into the wines and how they portray on each of them too.
But also the acids. And it's interesting how acid can present itself almost as its own flavor. I know within a grape, most winemakers are concerned with 3 acids, citric, tartaric, and malic. And those acids just do this ballet across the palate, and they do present very interestingly in this wine.
Yeah, and you want to have the balance. All of our red wine goes through malolactic fermentation too. Interesting enough, the malolactic fermentation in red wine can create flavor profiles. You have to be extremely careful because you can get sometimes when you get cola flavors on Pinots in particular, it actually is the malolactic fermentation and the presentation that's coming through in the fruit and changing.
Really?
Yeah.
That cola quality comes from ML that's
not
gone
always,
weird?
but it could be one of those parts that kind of comes through and how the malolactic fermentation is playing with and affecting it, and really that lactic acid bacterium and what you're choosing to inoculate with. Different strains will have different effects on the different Pinots, and it tends to come out in less of the, for white wine, malolactic fermentation for me changes the way the wine aesthetically presents itself. For Pinot, it's actually more about texture and flavor profile, interesting enough, and kind of how it presents and it really comes across for it. This is that Abbey Oak site that I was talking about. There is an Abbey, it's like in all winemaking, don't overthink it. There's an Abbey not too far away, so hence Abbey Oak, and there's white oaks on the property. Right. So don't overthink it on there. Lower elevation, but has that Willacante soil also. So this is our Evanstad our Evanstad Reserve Pinot Noir, 2017 vintage. The Evanstad Reserve Pinot Noir, I would say if you're going to put your name on something, it better be your flagship wine on there. And Ken and Grace Evanstad, this bears them. This is a representation of who they are. Year in and year out, this wine consistently delivers. It's been on Wine Spectator's top 100 list twice, including #1 Pinot Noir in the world from them. With the 2010 vintage on there. And really the defining thing for me is, we were talking about the Yamhill Cuvée, and you have like maybe red cherries. This to me is black cherries. It's that subtle difference in that physiological ripeness in the barrels that we're choosing. And from a barrel and from a a mouthfeel. This has got a silky presence to it, finish, that is different from the plushness of the Yamhill Cuvée. This has that lingering finish that just continues and goes on and on and on for it. What do you think, Carrie?
Oh,
I see a
beautiful.
smile, so.
No, as you were talking, I'm like, yep. It's
See,
definitely darker fruit.
it is.
Dark but fresh.
You have that little bit of a darker presence on the physiological ripeness for it. It doesn't mean that that both are equal in ripeness. It's just how the fruit's presenting and the barrels that we're choosing to kind of go with that. You can get with aging on this, further aging, you'll start to get some tertiary like leather coming across on it.
I get a little brown sugar.
White pepper in the background too, as far as the spice structure. It's light and subtle, so it's not overpowering. That comes through for there. You have raspberry and cherry flavors, but it's dark cherry and almost like that rich, ripe raspberry that kind of comes through for it. For me, obviously all the dishes that we already spoke about. I'd also say throwing in, that king salmon from Alaska that you get, that when you bake it and you get a little bit of that fat that comes out the sides of it, that white fat on the perfectly cooked king salmon fillet on there with a little bit of medium rare on the inside of this, that against this to me is like that's my dream dish, and that's what pairs. But I'd love throwing it against a ribeye too, or a filet mignon, or a duck, or anything in there.
You know what else I'm thinking? Pork belly.
Yeah.
Could you imagine this with pork belly?
Pork belly, porchetta, also those rich flavors just coming across on there.
Yeah, there's so many signature dishes I can picture pairing with this, because it has that same tannin structure of fine grained tannins that wash across the palate nice and even. Easter ham, I know that sounds very kind of pastoral, but Easter ham, this would be beautiful with an Easter ham. And again, pork belly, I get a little brown sugar, not sweetness, but just that richness. It's
no, I definitely see what you're saying. You're right. It's not the sucrosity or that sweetness, but the flavor profile of the brown sugar on the outside of the ham. That you
yes,
honeyed ham kind of.
Oh, this would be perfect with that and yams, and it would pair with so many different. This would be my Easter ham, Pinot, definitely.
I like to call it Tuesday night on there, but I'm also blessed. I work for the winery on there, so. But it's gorgeous.
I just bought a smoker. I just assembled it, and I'm thinking of all the things I could smoke and then eat with this. Oh my gosh, smoked salmon.
Turkey. We actually did a smoke. We did on the Traeger for Thanksgiving. We did a turkey.
Yeah.
And smoked turkey and Evanstad Reserve Pinot Noir. It's a crowd favorite, hands down on there. So
we got a camp chef. We got the camp chef. I'm going to be a smoker, insane person, and I'm going to be pairing. So,
well, once you start on it, it's a very addictive, very fun way to spend a weekend. I'm sure our followers and people listening in tonight also.
They know. They know. I bought like 6 different types of pellets so I can experiment with different woods, and it's going to be awesome. And these wines would be perfect for that because I'm very much about detail. I'm very, very detail oriented. And these wines are so intricate, so delicate, so detailed. I can tell they were made in a very painstaking manner. Because they're so focused. And a lot of times I'll taste a Pinot and I taste, 4 or 5 things. This is like 10, 12 things, and it's changing and evolving constantly. It's very hard to drill down to exactly what I'm experiencing. But one of the things I want to mention in this is I get a little bit of black tea, a little bit, like an Earl Grey almost.
Yeah, no, it's something that I think is
it's so good.
Something that you will find in our Evanstad Reserve Pinot Noirs year in and year out. It's just subtly that there's these little calling cards, and that's one of them in the background, and it just kind of sits on that. This is also 16 months in 100% French oak, sitting there and sat in the barrel. We're just going to release our 2018 Evanstad Reserve Pinot in probably 6-8 weeks, somewhere there. I mean, it's not even, and that's just introducing it to the world. That's not even like fully out in the marketplace and going there. And
Wow.
I always say is that, you'll see 2019 Pinots on a shelf. We purposely hold our wines back to make sure that they have the time to integrate them. Openly, they're not ready. That's the thing is that with the quality level and the sophistication of the wines, they need that time to get into a place. We'll never release it unless it's ready to be released. We're putting our stamp of approval on when we put our name out there, and it's the stamp of Ken and Grace on there. And they
And
really have a clear vision that everything that we do is meant to be quality. So.
And that's something I appreciate. You're not trying to push wine and get it out on the market. You're there to release it when it is ready. You've made that commitment to hold on to it and nurture it until it's ready. And that is absolutely wonderful. One of the things I wanted to ask you about are the French properties and estates that are affiliated with Domaine Serene.
Well, certainly, I appreciate the question on there. It has been an interesting endeavor. When I started here in 2013, first of all, it was basically getting invited to work at your dream job. I was just blown away that I had the opportunity to come work for Ken and Grace and work for this company, and still to this day feel very blessed to have this opportunity. Second part is I never in my wildest dreams would have ever imagined that, gosh, 2.5 years later, I'd be standing in the middle of a vineyard that had been farmed for 1,600 years with Pinot Noir in Burgundy, thinking this is part of our company and this is part of what we have. And so in 2015, in April of that year, Ken and Grace, as they put it, became the stewards of Chateau De La Crete. And I asked Grace what she meant when she said steward, and she said, Eric, with a property such as this and with land like this, you don't own land like this or a property like this. You're a steward of it in order to make sure that future generations have the opportunity to experience it. Chateau de la Crete was founded in 1431 by Nicolas Roland and his wife, Gugine de Celine. Nicolas Roland was the chancellor to the Duke of Burgundy and had been a lawyer by trade, and married a noble, his wife, Gugine de Celine, and really became the right-hand individual that ran all of Burgundy for Philip the Good, the Duke of Burgundy. Kind of putting it in perspective, they actually talk about Nicolas Roland at Versailles. And the reason for that is that the Sun King, Louis XIV, who created Versailles, actually had less power and less money than Philip the Good, the Duke of Burgundy, aka Nicolas Roland on there. When Nicolas Roland passed, he had 82 chateaus located throughout France on there, and one of those chateaus is Chateau de la Crete on there. It was burnt down during the Revolution. The original parts that still exist are the caves that exist below it, and having personally been into them and seeing the iron hooks where they used to put ropes through to lower the barrels into these caves, is a pretty incredible thing. We have 10 hectares or 25 acres that is located in Côte de Beaune from Pommard to Morange, 17 different climats, and we have seven of the vineyards are Premier Cru. We have 5 clos, and we actually have 2 monopoles over there where we own the entire vineyards, Clos du Chateau and Clos de Conferie, all located in Santenay for that. But Pommard, from Pommard to Morange, so Pommard, Merceau, Pligny-Montrachet, Chardonnay-Montrachet, and Santenay predominantly for the estates that we own over there. We've also invested just in the last year and a half. We purchased a historic property on the square in Santenay and have relaunched it, or in the process of relaunching it, Maison Evanstad. In Maison Evanstad, we'll really be utilizing our negociant license to purchase barrels at the Hospice de Beaune and Hospice de Nuit auctions, along with contracts that we have with farmers located throughout the Côte de Nuit and Côte de Beaune to produce wine. We are refurbishing the building behind it to have an interactive space that we can really have one of the leading experiences for wine tasting in all of Côte de Beaune and Côte de Nuit, the Côte d'Or over there. That should be open and launched in January or February of this upcoming year, and refurbishing this historic mansion, and really having the ability for our club members, have the ability to actually go stay in Burgundy over there for it. The last part that we have is Chateau De La Crete, which is a brand that you actually will find at Mollie Stone's there.
Yes.
And Chateau De La Crete is to me, it's a fantastic project because it's meant to bring two things. One, it's meant to demystify Burgundy. Burgundy can be, I think it was for me for years, even as a sommelier, until I went there, something that I didn't quite understand. And I knew I loved the wine, which is actually the most important part of anything. If you like the wine, that's the first start on there. But you have three challenges with Burgundy. And one is consistency of quality, much more so than Oregon. It's part of why so many vignerons from Burgundy are actually coming to Oregon, is because we have the ability to have much more consistent quality and crop size. Over there, consistency of quality can be a real challenge, and then consistency of quantity. For instance, all the frost that they had this year,
This year it's terrible.
how's
Yeah.
it going to affect all the land and the production? And even in a good year, production over there compared to Oregon is 0.5 or 50 to 70% of what you would have off of our yields, which are very low because we drop a lot of fruit here. So it's even that much more or less kind of, and then you throw into it frost or something of that nature. And the third part is price approachability, where you can find a wine where you've got great quality year in and year out, and you can say that, there's a consistent quantity of it, but it's $1,000 bottle of wine, or it's an $800 bottle of wine, or even $300 bottle of wine. So we wanted to find and make a program where we could have a wine that had a consistency of, first and foremost, a consistency of quality. And that's who we are. It had to be a quality product that we produce. Something that we could put out there that people could have and not just buy a bottle and then never see it again for 2 years, and then actually be able to buy it on that. And the last part was to have a price approachability to it. And the way that we found to do this was actually to look at a lesser known or accoladed region as far as outside of France. In France, they all know about it. And that's to go in Burgundy and go to Côte Chalonnaise down there. Côte Chalonnaise is only about 15 to 20 miles south of Côte de Beaune. And as such, is world-class growing region. It actually has the most acres of premier Chardonnay out of any region in Burgundy, and it tends to have a little bit more consistency in weather profile. So it has just a hint warmer, and it tends to not have the threat of frost and not have this. And so by creating a relationship down there with farmers in a cooperative for producing it, we were able to actually control both the viticulture and the vinification. So we get to treat it like a state fruit and actually give very detailed instructions for dropping fruit, leaf pulling, undertilling, all the things that make world-class wine, but also go through the process of ensuring that the winemaking is exactly to where we want, but all at a price that we could put out there, and you could find it and find a bottle of Premier Cru Chardonnay that would really deliver too. We also have a Côte de Beaune Knights Templar Cuvée, which is a blend of Santenay and Morange that we produce too. Some of that is estate fruit, not all of it, so we're not able to label it that way. But once again, it's meant to deliver consistency, quality, and really be able to have something. And I know Mollie Stone's carries those two wines too. So it'd be remiss not to mention a little bit about our project over there. So thank you for asking.
Yes, of course. We carry the wines. I have the Chardonnay in my cold box, and it does very, very well. It's beautiful, approachable, and it's not outrageously priced, but it's a beautiful cost to value ratio on that wine.
Yeah,
I highly
and I
recommend
think
it.
from a pairing standpoint too, the white wines, the Chardonnay and we talked about the scallops, we talked about the cheeses and stuff. It's hitting right on a lot of those same structural flavor profiles on there too. So
Oh,
certainly,
definitely.
let me.
Definitely.
I'm going to move this forward a little bit then, and so Jerusalem Hill. This is the site I was telling you about that has that Woodburn series soil, lowest elevation. It sits down in the Yola and the TAVA. Not in the slide too. I can say that we have a new site that's called King Creek that's up in the top of the same AVA, but it actually has the Jory soil because it's up at a higher elevation. It actually has that broken down basalt lava flow. I think we're on second leaf this year for it, so it'll be a bit before it becomes part of our portfolio, but it is part of our planted land down there. And, when we talk about America's most acclaimed winery, #1 American Pinot, #1 white wine in the world, #1 Pinot Noir in the world, #1 Pinot Noir in the world once again. And these are, we're talking Wine Spectator, Decanter, and Wine Enthusiast. These are the top judges, top individuals, and really giving us these accolades. And this isn't just a flash in the pan. This is something that we're here and consistently to do for it. Always interesting, to talk about too, is our Domaine Serene guaranteed corks. In 2014, we moved to these corks that we have branded as Domaine Serene guaranteed corks, but really are a unique process that we help to develop with the cork company that we work with for it. And the corks are not infallible, not perfect. Nothing in this world is perfect, but the rate of TCA is the lowest you'll find in the world on there. And it goes through 3 different levels of stages of testing. The very first stage that it goes through is that every single individual cork that we use, and this is for Burgundy, for Chateau De La Crete, Maison Evanstad, Chateau De La Crete, and then for Domaine Serene, we use these corks, and every single cork is put into a glass vial. Droplet of water is put in there to volatilize the esters, sealed. They let it sit for 24 hours, and there is a job out there for the very, very introverted people in the world. I would not last a second. And you actually sit there, they uncork every single, and they smell every cork. And they're smelling for TCA or trichloroanisole in particular, which is that wet dog or hay, that
moldy cardboard and wet
cardboard that you can kind of get, that mustiness that you can get off of a bad bottle, and really around upwards, depending upon the individual tester, anywhere from 27 to 35 off aromas too. So it's not just the TCA. And these are individuals that have the ability to sense down to 1 part per trillion for TCA on there. The next stage is that we actually put them through a mass gas spectrometer, which is a way, and it has only a singularity approach to it. It's a machine that you can only test for one thing. And this is solely to test for TCA, but it's able to test for TCA down to 1/3 of a part per trillion on there. And the last part that we put it through is we actually x-ray everything to understand the consistency of the cork and understand the microoxidation rate so that we can understand which bottles of wine they should go into and that they're going to fit into the parameters that we look for. In doing
OTR.
so, yeah.
OTR.
What?
It's the OTR?
Yeah.
Oxygen transfer rate.
Yep, exactly. And so by understanding that and understanding this level of what we're doing with these individual corks, we spend more on these corks than most wineries spend on their glassware on there. We think that we put enough effort into making world-class Pinot Noir and Chardonnay that this is the least we can do to try and protect that product and make sure that the experience that when you uncork one of our bottles, that it hits and delivers on there. And like I said, it's not infallible. Nothing in life is absolutely 100% perfect, but the idea is that we're able to still have that microoxidation occur through natural cork because we think it's critical for all of our wines on there, but yet we're putting every effort we can into protecting the product for you. There.
No, that's great. TCA not only can be like wet cardboard, moldy book, but it can also strip a wine entirely of its varietal characteristics. So if you ever open up a bottle of wine and it tastes like water, that is a guise of trichloroanisole, which not a lot of people know about. I took a day-long course in TCA at UC Davis. Lisa Vandewater was one of the teachers, and it was very, very interesting to learn all about TCA and corks and closures.
Yeah, you can get this, you can have it, I'll have it muted. I had this happen. I was out with actually some of my very close friends. This is 2 years ago, pre-COVID, but we were out and I ordered a bottle of Evanstad Reserve. I was going to share some at the table. We went out to a nice dinner, and I asked the waiter, it's like, this is off. And everybody at the table just looked at me like I was crazy. They're like, no, it's not off. And the waiter, so the wine director comes out and says, no, this isn't, he was trying to politely tell me, no, it's not. And I was like, I hadn't introduced myself. So I politely introduced myself and said, don't worry about it. I'll replace any bottle. I work for the winery on there, but let's just get another bottle out. So they humored me and brought another bottle out. And all of a sudden, everybody was able to put them side by side, including the wine director, and see that it was muted and it was TCA. And
that's a guise of TCA, and people don't realize that.
And it wasn't, nothing else to it besides the fact that it was muted gave away that it was a bad bottle, but it was muted. It just wasn't expressing itself in that way that I know the wine could show itself. And it's just that can be a very subtle thing too. And for us, I know the wines because I live, breathe, and sleep them, on there. My biggest fear is that somebody who's just experiencing it for the first time is going to walk away from having one of our wines and do a shoulder shrug, and when asked how the wine was, and it was okay on there, and have it be something like that. And that's why we put this effort into it. That's why the winemaking team and production team really spend all their time trying to ensure that we have one of the cleanest facilities in the world to begin with, and that we put the effort into the barrel management, into the corks, and into the bottles, and that we're not getting in our own way, basically, and we're allowing the consumer, you and our club members, to really have the opportunity to enjoy what they wanted to begin with on there.
Eric, I really want to thank you for celebrating Oregon Wine Month with us here at Mollie Stone's. This has been absolutely wonderful to taste the wines of America's most acclaimed winery, Domaine Serene. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much.
And I do want to mention that next Thursday, May 27th, Mollie Stone's has an online cheese tasting. It's Cheese 101 with our very own Chelsea Fortiani. That's at 4 p.m. You can sign up at www.molliestones.com/events. So that's molliestones.com/events for an awesome cheese tasting with our very own Chelsea Fortiani, who's a certified cheese specialist. Eric, again, this has been a fantastic way to celebrate my 2-year anniversary with Mollie Stone's.
I'll be back next year for your 3rd, and the year after that for your 4th.
I hope so. I'm really enjoying my time with Mollie's, and to that I say cheers.
Yeah, to all of you. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you.